Hey everyone, Mike from Videomaker here with a first impressions review of the Samsung NX500 mirrorless interchangeable lens camera. It's one of the most affordable cameras that's available that can shoot 4K video. Okay, so I'm not going to really get into, the deep analysis of sample footage. We've shot quite a bit of footage, but it wasn't really shot into highly controlled scenarios. But I can give you sort of a high-level impression of what we're seeing at first glance. Really, the footage looks like anything you would get out of a normal sort of consumer camera or a DSLR. The dynamic range seems a little bit low. It's very contrasty, but sharpness is on par with what you get out of a consumer camera, as is the color reproduction. It's not terribly flat, time will tell how it turns out in post-production. But in general, there's nothing really remarkable or disappointing about it, except for that it's highly contrasty, so dynamic range is not amazing at first glance. But again, we'll get into deeper analysis in a full review later down the road. Okay, so beyond that, let's talk about two different aspects of this camera. One is sort of the shooting experience and the controls in the camera itself, and the other we'll talk about is the post-production workflow, which is a little bit different with this camera than a lot of cameras on the market. So as for the camera itself, really it's a joy to use. It's very, very compact, as you can see. It's got this very compact lens, not quite a pancake lens, but this 16 to 50 millimeter lens is very, not quite pocketable, but very, very compact. It's got a tiltable LCD, which does come all the way around for really good selfies if you're into that kind of thing. Also really handy if you're shooting video and you're trying to get a low angle or a high angle. This tiltable screen is really nice. In general, the screen itself is highly contrasty, so it looks nice when you're actually looking at it. Pictures and previews look nice and vibrant. However, it's not terribly bright, so if you're shooting, even in indirect sunlight outdoors, you may have difficulty seeing the screen without cupping your hand over it or using some other sort of shade. And there is no viewfinder, so the LCD is kind of all you get unless you output to a HDMI monitor. Now, as I mentioned, it does shoot 4K. Now, this is an $800 interchangeable lens camera, which shoots 4K, which is actually quite remarkable. Really, it's the only camera under $1,000 that shoots 4K that you can swap the lenses out on. Interestingly, GoPro shoots 4K and Samsung's own smartphones shoot 4K. But if you need something with interchangeable lenses, this is kind of your only option before cracking the 4-digit mark. So actually, in reality, even though it does shoot 4K, the 4K shooting experience, the quality of the footage aside, is actually kind of cumbersome and not that great. And the reason is, this camera actually has a 1.5 times crop factor with any lens when you're shooting stills or HD video. But when you go to shoot 4K, it actually crops it even more. So as it turns out, most cameras, when you're shooting video, use the entire sensor and then they resize that video to whatever size it's going to be, usually HD. Well, a camera of this size and of this power doesn't have quite the processing power to use that entire sensor and resize it in 4K, and it kind of chokes, or at least that's what Samsung tells me. So what that means is it shoots 4K in a way that doesn't require any resizing in camera, so it crops out the center of the sensor. And what that means is if you have something like a 10 millimeter fisheye lens, it kind of acts like a 25 or 26 millimeter lens. So, if you're going to be shooting 4K video with this, you better have a lot of room between you and your subject, because you may have to back off quite a bit to compensate for that crop factor. In addition, there's no dedicated movie mode. So what that means is you're looking at the screen and it uses the entire picture of the screen, and then as soon as you hit the record button, it immediately starts recording and then letterboxes. So there's no real guide to tell you when you hit the record button how your framing is going to look, which is kind of cumbersome. That said, if you're shooting HD, you don't really have to worry about the cropping. You get the standard crop factor of the sensor, and there's no additional cropping, and it makes it much easier. So all that said, it's actually kind of a fun camera to use. It's, like I said, very small. It's very mobile in a sense. It's very easy to go out and shoot and not have to sort of think about lugging all this extra gear and equipment. For stills, it's a blast. I mean, we're talking about an ideal still shooting sort of Instagram machine. You know, it's got Wi-Fi capability to attach to your phone, so you can snap photos away and then send them to your phone, and they just look gorgeous sharing those to Instagram, way better than even the best smartphone camera. Unfortunately, we can't say the same thing about the video. See, the Samsung NX500 shoots H.265 video only, and there aren't any smartphones on the market right now which, you know, can work natively with H.265 footage. So even if you use the smallest file size on here, the smallest resolution video, it still uses H.265. And when you load up the Samsung Transfer app on your phone, now this is Android or iOS or whatever you want to use, it only recognizes photos. So if you plan to use this as an Instagram machine for video, think again, it's just not going to work. So speaking of H.265 and video, let's talk about post-production. Now, most modern computers, no matter how new they are, whether they're running Windows or OS X, just can't run H.265 natively. And I don't just mean Windows Media Player or QuickTime. Even VLC won't play H.265. You can't drop it into Media Encoder. You can't drop it into Premiere or Final Cut or Vegas. That just won't play. And not only will it not play, but there are not a lot of encoders that can handle it. You know, like I just mentioned, even Adobe Media Encoder won't take H.265 files if you want to transcode them into H.264. So then what are your options? Well, Handbrake does work. Now, if you're using the PC version of Handbrake, that's great. You can load them in and convert them to H.264. It'll take a while, but it'll work. Unfortunately, you do have to transcode them just to kind of preview them. You know, Handbrake doesn't play real-time previews all that well. If you're using a Mac, Handbrake still works, but there's no batch processing. So if you've got 100 files you're trying to offload, you got to do them one at a time. Now, Samsung does make a piece of software that can help you with this. When you plug your NX500 into your computer for the first time, it'll ask you if you want to install this iLauncher, which gives you all sorts of options for different programs you can install. So for Windows, they have an application called Samsung Movie Converter, and you open that up, drag and drop your H.265 files in there, and it auto-selects them all, and you can just sort of hit convert, and it'll convert them all into H.264 files. Now, the downside with this is it's really slow. It's really slow. To convert about 13 gigs of footage this morning took 3 hours for me. So, you know, 13 gigs of 4K video is not a ton of video, you know. That was basically after coming back from, I don't know, an hour-and-a-half shoot. So, you know, it's not a lot, and it takes a long time. To make matters worse, if you're on a Mac, you're just out of luck. As of this recording, Samsung doesn't have Movie Converter for Mac. So your files are kind of being held hostage by the camera, in essence, unless you want to go through the Handbrake option of going one at a time. You can also download software like Wondershare, for example. I say download, I should say purchase. You can get it for $60, and it'll convert H.265 to H.264, but you know, it's $60. That said, I have heard, actually read online that it is quite a bit faster, up to 4 times faster. Haven't tested that in-house yet, but it is an option. Now, the benefit to shooting in H.265 is the files are really, really small, even compared to H.264. In fact, you know, based on my tests, it came out to be about, you know, 1/2 to 1/3 the size of files on H.265 to H.264. So, you know, going out with a 64 gig SD card, you can shoot all day. I haven't filled up an SD card yet at 64 gigs, so storage options should really not be an issue at all. Samsung is really banking on H.265 being a new standard, and you know, for the sake of anyone who purchases one of these cameras, I hope they're right, because right now the process really is pretty cumbersome. Okay, so let's really quickly review the pros and cons of the NX500. So the first big pro, obviously, is, you know, it shoots 4K and it's pretty cheap at $800. The downside to that is you get a pretty incredible crop factor of, you know, 2.5-ish, which makes, you know, shooting a little bit difficult because you're going to have to back away from your subject quite a bit. But heck, 4K for $800, interchangeable lenses, that's a big plus. Second big pro is it's super compact. This LCD is really nice, flips out all over the place, really good for selfies if you're into that kind of thing, but also, you know, if you're shooting some low angle video, it's good to be able to see that screen. from just about any vertical angle that you want. Downside is, the screen is not terribly bright and can be hard to see outside. There's no viewfinder to look through if you're into still photography. It's nice to be able to hold that up to your eye, but that doesn't exist. So, you have to get used to sort of cupping that screen. The video quality, again, I didn't get too deep into the video quality, but it's actually pretty good, other than being a bit contrasty. Even the flat mode, which is just a picture wizard off essentially, is still pretty contrasty. But other than that, it's pretty sharp for a consumer camera. Pretty nice color for a consumer camera. One big con: there is no microphone input on the NX500. Our typical litmus test for is it a video camera is, does it have a microphone input? And this does not. In fact, the only reason why we're giving it as much attention as we are is because of the 4K capability. But under normal circumstances, we would see this as not even a proper video camera with no microphone input. So if you get this camera and you're shooting primarily video, you're gonna have to get an external recorder, which hopefully if you've been shooting for a while, you are already used to that process. But if you're a beginner, that's kind of a big flaw. And lastly, the H.265 format is both a blessing and a curse. A blessing because you can shoot tons of video on a single card, you can shoot all day. Well, I don't want to say all day. You can shoot for a long time and hardly ever fill up a bigger card. It's great. It's just nice to be able to not have to worry about storage. The downside is, right now the workflow is really kind of a pain. Getting all of these files converted to H.264 is cumbersome, to say the least, time-consuming, to say the least. It's just one of those trade-offs you have to deal with. And hopefully when you're watching this review, maybe sometime in the near or distant future, Microsoft and Apple have adopted H.265 and integrated it a little bit more. I should say Adobe and Sony and Avid and all those companies as well. But as of now, spring 2015, it's still kind of unfortunate that the workflow is so difficult. But all that being said, it's important to remember that this is a consumer camera at $800. And really, when we're talking about an $800 consumer camera, it is pretty impressive with what it does. And bottom line is it's pretty fun. Like I said, it's a great Instagram machine for stills. Not video yet, but for stills. And you can shoot 4K out of the box if you can deal with that crop factor, or pretty good 1080 video. So who is this camera for then, essentially? Professionals? No, just not really. If you're professional, you're probably gonna wanna get the NX500's bigger brother, the NX1, or a Panasonic GH4, or a Sony a7S. This is not a professional camera. It might be a professional's B camera. It might be, well, I don't wanna say it might be. This is a professional's fun time camera. This is what they take on vacation, I think. It just plain is fun to use, takes good photos, takes decent video. So I can definitely see a professional using this sort of secondarily to their main camera. And then finally, it's a good camera for a beginner or an enthusiast or someone who wants to get into 4K video and who doesn't have a bunch of money. Because it works, it just plain works. You get 4K video, it's $800. If you've got the external recorder for your audio, you're in pretty good shape. So that's pretty much the NX500. And again, we'll look at the footage in a little bit more detail later on, but hopefully that's a good sort of high-level first impressions look. So again, I'm Mike from Videomaker. Thanks for taking the time to watch this first impressions review of the NX500. If you want to fall down the rabbit hole and continue watching some Videomaker videos, check out either of the two outside videos below. If you're a beginner and you want to learn more about all the manual controls involved with shooting with a DSLR or a cinema camera, or video cameras in general, check out our premium Plus member video in the center, camera controls and settings. And again, that's for Plus members only, so consider signing up for that and help support this channel. And if you want to learn more about videography in general and filmmaking, and you want to be alerted to things like brand new reviews and all that, be sure to sign up for our email newsletter right over here. And we'll send you an email when that comes out, as well as the latest from Videomaker as it happens. So again, I'm Mike. Thanks for watching.